Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Red Dragon, starring Anthony Hopkins, Edward Norton, Ray Fiennes, Harvey Keitel, Emily Watson, Mary Louise Parker, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, directed by Brett Ratner. The same story as Manhunter, although I did go to theaters for this when I was I forget, but I was pretty young. And I don't want to get into the drama behind it, but I was forced to watch it, not by, even though I had a ticket for another movie. I won't say which one because that would be wrong, but I accidentally went with my dad. So I just stayed in there and watched the whole thing the whole time instead of watching the movie I bought the ticket for. So let's see if it's as good as Manhunter, which I didn't think that was good. Or let's see if it's better. Let's get into it. We open with an opera where Hannibal Lecter, returned by Anthony Hopkins, is in the audience watching a friend of his as he has dinner with the performers. While one of the performers is missing, and after dinner, Hannibal gets an unexpected visitor from Special Agent Will Graham, played by Edward Norton, as he's asking about the missing performer and his theories about him as he catches Hannibal after seeing something in the book, which I don't necessarily get. And Hannibal stabs Will to the ground, and he gets Hannibal in the stomach and shoots him down where it doesn't hit the heart. And how could you not miss the heart with the gun? Which which doesn't make sense. And Ed Norton as Will Graham is kind of sour as a performance, but the only thing holding this movie for my enjoyment is Anthony Hopkins as Dr. Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter, in my opinion, as he may be the best thing about the movie as it elevates the whole tone of the movie. We go through the opening credits and see what the plot of this movie is, and if you haven't seen Manhunter, you're fucked, because now I'm going through this shit quicker, as it's the same plot in this movie as Manhunter, as Will Graham is sour as hell, and we barely see Hannibal, as Anthony Hopkins happens to be too top billed, and we see Will getting approached at his lake house in Marathon, Florida by Jack Crawford. And yes, Silence of the Lambs is Jack Crawford, this time played by Harvey Keitel, as he wants Will to solve the Tooth Fairy crimes, as he tells him about it. And I don't like Crawford this time, like I didn't care for him in Manhunter. Jack wants Will to go to Atlanta to look at some things, as his wife Molly, played by Mary Louise Parker, is reluctant about it. And Will decides to go, and these scenes on the lake house is dead in the water for me. Will gets to Atlanta to look at the house, as he has questions about what happened at the crime, like where's the dog, because nobody's heard barking, for example, as he searches the house. And I do like the opening score during the opening credits, but everything else sounds bad as far as the score is concerned. For example, Will enters the house bedroom and sees blood as well as the children's room, as the score is awful here. While Will learns the killer puts mirrors in their eyes so he can get an audience, and he gets his gloves off to take a bite of a woman of the family named Mrs. Leeds. And Will figures out this case rather quickly, and my problem is Will is a sour character I just cannot connect with. When the FBI gets a killer, Will is approached by Freddie Lowndes, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, and I swear to God this character felt very comedic, as in an unfunny kind of way. Will visits Hannibal in the prison he put him in for more information about the Tooth Fairy killer, and the prison scene isn't as scary as in The Silence of the Lambs, which is a problem with not only Manhunter, but in this movie. Hannibal tells Will about him as he's a shy boy. By he, I'm talking about the Tooth Fairy killer. After an hour, as he gives advice to not be a coward, while Freddy takes pictures of Will getting out of the prison, Hannibal was at, and while at the house, Will watches a video of the family living at the house and goes into the cabin, and the movie slows way the hell down, and like Manhunter, but this is sort of better. This movie has the same amount of minutes as Manhunter, as it's a little too long, And we could keep the scene with Hannibal and stuff that was in Manhunter, like in the cabin, where Will solves the case of the Tooth Fairy, the things that made there's scenes that needed to be in the editing room to be cut out, as it's a little too long. We get to meet the Tooth Fairy killer named Francis Dollarhide, played this time by Ray Fiennes, and we imagine him as a child as he wets his pants and his grandmother beats him like hell and calls him a beast and calls him disgusting, as his backstory this time is sad for sure. And I like Ray Fiennes in general, but unfortunately this movie doesn't do him any favors either. We get Will visiting Hannibal in a prison like Jim, where they take a walk as Will explains the Red Dragon to Hannibal, and the scene kind of bothered me as the cinematography is shot kind of badly. And in my opinion, we see Francis going to a blind Reba McClane, played by this time Emily Watson, to get something for the zoo as he works there, and her co-worker Ralph offers Reba a ride out of pity. But next thing you know, Francis offers her a ride, and she accepts, and she offers him a drink and with pie. When they get to her house, and their romance is fine at best, but at the same time, a little awkward in my opinion. And these scenes don't work as well as Manhunter, where I liked Francis as a character, but here his character isn't quite as good as the actor in Manhunter, in my opinion. Francis writes a letter to Hannibal, and the FBI pick on the letter while Hannibal is in a different room for maintenance purposes, as Hannibal comes out noticing a glove out of a guard's pocket, which is obvious that he knows the FBI is up to something, as they discover Hannibal gives the home address to Will's Lake house, as Will is led to believe someone is going after Mary and his son Josh and bring them to Atlanta, as Josh learns to fish while Molly learns to shoot a gun, while they get Freddy to write a story. And again, the character is way too comedic with his laughing, as it bothered me in this scene especially. Freddy gets captured and tortured by Francis, as Francis superglues Freddy and shows him his red dragon tattoo, as he learns about it and shows him his victim's photos and tells Freddy to tell the truth, and he bites off his nose and sets him on fire, which is maybe the most frightening scene in this whole movie, in my opinion, and as I'll compliment the scene at this point. The dead body on a wheelchair has a tape saying the FBI forced him to lie, and Will has no choice but to go back to Baltimore. And at this point, I'm bored with the movie. Will visits Hannibal, and they both act rude to each other as they don't seem to care, and now I start to not care. And when the fuck did I ever care? Francis takes Reba to the zoo to touch a tiger, and I did like the scene as it fascinates me to learn a little bit about tigers. While they are apex predators, but the scene did work for me. Reba tells Francis about how people look at him like women find him mysterious, as this Francis is briefly growing on me, but not still quite as good as the actor from Manhunter. Francis puts on a family video for work as he turns down the sound and keeps the music on while watching the family, and she starts to kiss him, and they sleep together until the next morning. She disappeared to go to the backyard, and he hears the flared dragon talking to him by saying kill her, as he almost kills himself, and he says to Reba that he's going away on a trip, and this romance is fine, but it has no chemistry between the two characters. Will continuously looks at the tapes and to see something different, as this movie is getting tired at this point, as I've got 25 minutes of movie left, but I'm not quite checked out of it quite yet. I'm not sure if I will be by the time the movie ends. Francis knocks a woman out and eats a piece of paper, which is fucking nasty, by the way, while he attacks his assistant, while Will solves the case. And they're on the way to get Francis, as Francis sees Will at his work building and catches Reba with Ralph, as Ralph kisses Reba in the cheek, and Francis shoots Ralph in the head and gets Reba into his truck and takes him into his house to warn her about the Red Dragon, as he's led to believe she made him weak. And he points the gun at her because he wanted to trust her, as he starts to burn the house down and can't shoot Reba, but he shoots himself, and the FBI arrives while the fire is burning the house, and they get Reba into custody, and the house explodes. And come on, he's not dead yet. As it was way too goddamn obvious. And the scenes were just dull, in my opinion. Will gets back to his family while Jack learns Francis is alive. And Josh gets attacked by Francis and is held captive while leaking in his pants as Will insults him with the words of his grandmother as Francis attacks Will, and they hide, and Will shoots Francis down while Will is wounded, and Molly shoots Francis in the head, and now he's dead, and Hannibal writes a letter to Will while he's on the boat, and Hannibal is told the young FBI agent is here to ask him some questions as he asks what is her name, which will be where the Silence of the Lambs starts, and the climax tells me at the end of the day I don't really like this movie as Anthony Hopkins is barely in it, and the characters are sour. But don't get me wrong, Hopkins is the best thing about the movie. Let's get to that, and you'll see why. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.1 out of 10. A little better than Manhunter, but this movie is a little longer than that film with the same characters, but like in Manhunter, not that interesting. Anthony Hopkins is the best thing about the movie, but it's unfortunately not as good as a performance as in Silence of the Lambs, and Will Graham comes off as a sourpuss, let's say, as the characters are not intriguing to watch. The movie is directed poorly as the cinematography is bad looking, and this whole movie is dull. At the end of the day, there's a few things I complimented about the movie, but at the end of the day, I didn't really like the film. I'm sorry, I can't talk about it any further than that. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I will be back with Hannibal Rising, the final Hannibal Lecter film. And until then, well, hello and goodbye, Clarice.